Originally conceived as a long-range escort fighter, the F-101 quickly evolved into something far more dangerous.
The mission was brutal. Hug the Earth, stay beneath radar, deliver the payload. The pilot's life was measured in feet and seconds. One mistake, one momentary lapse of focus, and the...
While the B model became named famous hunting Charlie.
The klaxon screams. From 0 to supersonic in minutes. Every second is life or death.
Like a ghost leaving its lair, the tactical Voodoo slipped out long night.
Zero visibility, minimal time, maximum power. The F-101 swallowed the night,
And then, silence from the wheels. The tactical Voodoo was airborne. The only way back was success.
With the gear locked up and the afterburners sustaining the climb, the Voodoo began its long, rapid ascent, turning kinetic energy into mission potential.
At 40,000 feet, over the black curve of the Earth, the world disappeared.
overhead profile, no sense, man.
The Voodoo's shadow was its only friend. Treetop height was not a metaphor. It was a precise, terrifying reality the pilots lived within.
The only way to navigate was by feel, by map, and by the faint, ghostly returns on the radar scope. Hunting over the dark, cold rivers, the Voodoo had no margin. For a split second, the reflection was visible, a phantom speeding through the night.
Digital systems were coming, but for the tactical Voodoo, navigation was still a physical fight. Map.
The margin for error was non-existent. Over mountainous terrain, the F-101 became a roller coaster, demanding
The G-force hits like a physical blow. The tactical Voodoo demanded not just skill, but a massive physical price, pulling for...
Every violent maneuver put immense, cumulative strain on the airframe. The Voodoo was a strong machine, but the low-level profile...
CAC point, the castle tower. Visual confirmation, time check, fuel check, position check. The only constant that was displaced was the brain. Simulated or nose tracers were reminded the Voodoo pull in. Instinct and training take over. The F-101 demands a brutal, immediate response. No time for thought, only reaction.
The world remembers the interceptor Voodoo and the recon Voodoo. But the tactical Voodoo, the nuclear strike bird, was...
The tactical Voodoo was a thirsty jet. Fuel was always the tightest parameter. Low-level, high-speed flow.
Even at 500 feet, the threat wasn't always from the ground. Every pilot knew, somewhere above them, the mission's final phase, the penetration dash. Fuel is forgotten, threats are ignored, maximum speed. Target check. Arming sequence confirmed. In 2 seconds, the Voodoo would commit to the delivery maneuver. Now, first punch to the pipeline is almost cross high. The pilot holds almost 6 Gs, using the Velocraft to talk. Release. The rotating bay minimizes exposure time. The weapon is away. Escape. Roll inverted. Pitch down. Dive for the deck.
Now negative G's as the world flips. The speed builds violently. He must flatten the dive and regain the low-level profile at the last...
And then, the flash. The raw, terrifying energy of tactical warfare released.
The flash, even miles away, threatened the pilot's sight. Years of training demanded the reflex. Shield the invisible hammer. The blast's pressure wave. It hits like a brick wall, violently tossing the Voodoo.
Achieved. Objective achieved. But the Voodoo's mission was only half complete. Now began the
The immediate danger passed. Now, the grueling work of navigation began again.
The philosophy was simple. Speed equals survival. The Voodoo was driven to its maximum limits, flying.
A high-speed retreat meant constant internal management. The pilot had to manually babysit the fuel system, transfer.
The F-101 was one of the first production fighters truly capable of sustained supersonic flight at high speed. The retreat was no less dangerous than the penetration. The pilot was navigating a deadly maze of rapidly expanding Soviet.
It was a world of reflections. The pilot, the instruments, and the rushing darkness, all contained in a tiny.
Every low-level pilot knew the unspoken fear, not of the enemy, but of the machine's inherent vice.
1,000 lives slept unaware below. The Voodoo was the Cold War's ghost.
The F-101 required a constant, brutal hand. At Mach 1.2, every millimeter of stick travel translated.
This was the price of the tactical Voodoo mission.
The toss bombing maneuver was mathematically elegant, but physically brutal. It required perfect execution.
The final check was always the weapon bay. The complex rotary mechanism had to operate flawlessly, or the most critical two.
In the Voodoo, the pilot's left hand was the master of destiny. Every mission began and often ended with the full.
At extreme low level and high Mach, the air itself became a threat. Maintaining stable, high-pressure airflow into the air.
In the endless, roaring dark, the pilot found a cold comfort in routine. No excitement, no heroic.
The speed could not outrun the consequence. The act was done. For every lone pilot, there were dozens of unseen hands. The maintenance crews of TAC were the silent backbone. The tactical Voodoo was just one piece in a massive, high-stakes game. Its mission,
In the cold, dark hangars of European air bases, the tactical Voodoos sat, armed and ready.
They lived for the sound of the buzzer, the high-pitched electronic signal that meant World War III had begun.
The mission was non-negotiable. Penetrate the Iron Curtain at high speed at 0 feet.
Every second was life or death!
The pre-planned dash from the ready room to the cockpit, a full sprint.
5 points with a 5 for harness. Cinched tight, unforgiving.
No hesitation, no delay. From alarm to runway threshold, the Voodoo crew's mission was simply to be the fastest.
Full military power. Check. Afterburners. IG and IE.
Brakes released. Acceleration pins the South Asian female pilot to the seat. Mach 0.9 before the wheels are even off the ground.
Takeoff was violent. Loaded heavy with fuel and the tactical store, the Voodoo clawed for altitude.
Gear up! The moment the wheels left the concrete, the first step of the checklist was already critical.
And then, the Voodoo was gone. A high-speed ghost.
The F-101 was a family, not a single jet. The larger, two-seat F-101B, the Interceptor. The pilot became a human gyroscope, cross-checking the instruments in a relentless loop. At this speed,
Terrain! Terrain!
At 50 feet, there was no time for calculation. The pilot was flying on instinct, fighting the machine.
The pilot received his targets and route from a single point, the tactical commander. Every flight path, every contingency.
risk was a given, but the pilot knew the truth. At the speed and altitude required for the escape maneuver,
In the Voodoo, the pilot was also the navigator. Deep in enemy territory, there was no ground-based guidance.
The Doppler system, revolutionary for its time, still required constant feeding and correction. Every change in
Signal degradation.
When the electronics failed, the Cold War pilot was thrown back into the age of pure navigation. The cloth map.
The pilot's constant companion was the G-force.
The human body was the mission's softest link. At 9 Gs, the pilot had to fight to keep the blood.
Radar lock.
Ground control could guide them near to the line.
The Voodoo's mission required it to fly blind.
They flew low enough to cast a long, hostile shadow. The F-101 was a mechanical specter, flying below
the final checkpoint passed. The only map left was the mind, and the only certainty was the weapon now armed in the bay.
Weapon arming check, complete. Velocity, max. Altitude, 0. Time to target, T-minus 1 minute. Arming complete, the point of no return. The weapon was live, the fuse set, and the jet was now committed to the full sequence of the low-altitude bombing system.
The anti-aircraft defenses were now awake. The ground was firing back. The pilot's only defense was his speed,
The final visual aid. The initial point. A specific field, a single bridge, a bend in the river.
Stick forward!
The Voodoo dropped inches closer to the Earth, setting the exact altitude and airspeed for the final approach. This was
50 feet! The final, terrifying minimum! At 700 knots, the pilot had no margin for error. Every tiny hill...
The pilot pulls the stick back with every ounce of his strength. 9 Gs, the instant release. The entire complex rotary dance took less than half a second. The weapon was launched.
Start over!
The pilot inverted and began the high G push. The goal, maximize the distance from the target.
Detonation. The pilot, speeding away at Mach 1.4. The thermal pulse. Even from miles away, the brightness was staggering.
The Voodoo saw it first. The rising column and smoke, the first moment.
shockwave. Moving faster than the pilot could react, the compressed air slammed into the Voodoo, a physical blow that threatened to tear the airframe apart. The after turbulence was a maelstrom. Every muscle strained to keep the jet from tearing itself out of his grasp.
Maximum velocity. Mach 1.4. The F-101 was a streak of pure speed. Final assembly. The political machine reacted instantly. The tactical strike meant full mobilization. Back home, the entire base... Distance 1. The jet had outrun the initial devastating wave. For a moment, the pilot allowed himself to...
Back to the numbers. The successful pilot immediately dumped the nose, reset the trim, and locked the heading indicator onto the programmed return vector.
Mission status confirmed. Request emergency vector, fuel critical.
The silence was the loudest sound. The adrenaline drained away, leaving only the crushing weight of realization.
The returning pilot was not a hero. He was a radiological threat. The decontamination team, working in the pre-dawn darkness.
The lights. A straight, familiar line cutting through the darkness. After the chaos, the destruction, and the high-speed run.
Gear down, flaps set. The final, familiar sequence. The click of the green lights. The only confirmation.
The first step of debriefing was the washdown. A violent, clinical cleansing to strip the airframe of any lethal.
Throttles to off. The twin J-57 engines wound down, releasing the pressure on the airframe. The Voodoo was silent. The mission was complete.
The silence of the cockpit, deeper than any combat zone, was the hardest adjustment. It was the moment the man, not
Heavy lever! The final procedural step before the decompression of the cockpit and the confrontation with the world waiting outside.
the reception committee, silent, masked, and prepared. The ground crew, dressed in clinical white and yellow, stood as the final barrier.
The helmet, the hard shell of the warrior, remove.
The reflection held the truth. Not of the mission, but of the cost. The pallor of the skin, the fatigue in the eye. The final confirmation. The decontamination specialist approached, the long, clinical wand his only tool of communication. The debriefing. The first step in transforming the chaos of the mission into clinical, classified data.
The flight recorder held the unblinking truth. Every G-force, every course correction, every altitude reading. Independent.
The legacy of the Voodoo would largely be defined by another variant, the long-range, two-seat F-101B Interceptor.
The debriefing was over, but the duty was not. The future meant adapting to the defensive role of the F-101B. The pilot was reassigned.
But the sun was setting on the original Voodoo line. The new tactical reality demanded a multi-role machine.
A final moment in the quiet of the hangar. The touch of the ejection seat handle. The silent promise of life held by the machine.
The true history of the F-101A and C models was a gap in the official record. Its operational story.
The official record was set in stone. The museum plaque described the Voodoo as a pioneering interceptor and high-speed.
Decades passed. The pilot returned to a civilian world he had once been prepared to end. He lived a...
The weight of the secret was the price of his survival. Even in the deepest peace, the memory of the light.
The bases that housed the tactical Voodoos were eventually repurposed, mothballed, or demolished. A private history. All that remained of the dangerous brotherhood of the tactical Voodoo pilots. The bold...
The public remembered the F-101 as the interceptor, the guardian of the North American skies. The true...
The man who was ready to end the world was never truly able to sleep in it again. The anxiety was
The small, plastic recreation was his quiet act of remembrance, a methodical, private acknowledgement of the machine that carried his burden.
The conversations were easy, except for one subject. He could speak of the F-101B, the interceptor.
But the world had moved on, and the nature of the fight had changed. He watched the new generation, unaware of the terrifying brink they once stood upon. But for those who were there, who flew at the edge of the sound barrier with the fate of the world in the belly of a single-seat jet. The calculus of war was changing.
The decision, based on strategic redundancy and the cost of maintaining a specialized, single-role fleet, was finalized in the quiet of an office.
But for the pilots, the truth was immortalized in a secret motto. The low-level mission, the only way to penetrate
the once magnificent Voodoo was reduced to a shell, stripped of the electronics and systems that gave it its...
Though obsolete in the tactical nuclear role, the Voodoo airframe, especially the reconnaissance RF-100C, found...
A salute offered not to a public hero, but to a silent comrade. Even after the retirement order, the technical secret endured. The F-101C's ability to carry and accurate...
This was the image they carried. The sharp, low-slung, unforgiving silhouette of the Voodoo.
This was the mission. Mach 1.4, less than 200 feet above the Earth. The tactical Voodoo utilized pure speed and altitude denial.
A single pilot, alone in the fastest single-seat machine of its time.
The machine was fast, but the pilot paid the price. The relentless G-forces required to keep the Voodoo low and...
The F-101 was a massive fighter, built to carry immense fuel loads. Its long legs and high speed...
The paint chipped, the mission faded, but the mark of the tactical Voodoo squadrons endured.
The true record of the tactical Voodoo pilots, their targets, their successes, and their near misses remains here.
The F-101 Voodoo.
For a critical period, the F-101 held the absolute speed record for an operational fighter. This machine was built to win the race against time and gravity.
The mission was brief, the delivery decisive, but the core purpose of the tactical Voodoo was always to deter this very moment.
The Voodoo's airframe was ultimately saved from obscurity by its sheer speed and size, finding a long, successful career.
The secret to its Mach 1.4 low-level performance lay in its shape. The area rule, or wasp waist design.
The speed, the burden, the urgency. The truth of the tactical Voodoo is found in the pressure of those moments.
The story deserves to be told. The F-101A and C Voodoo, the tactical fighter bomber.
Though the single-seat tactical mission ended, the magnificent Voodoo airframe continued its service for decades in other roles.
He flew the mission that was never supposed to happen, prepared for a consequence that was never supposed to be survivable.
The tactical Voodoo was a specialized machine, produced in limited numbers. Just 124 airframes were built.
And we remember the maintenance teams. The tactical Voodoo demanded absolute perfection. These were the men who ensured... Deployed close to the Iron Curtain and strategic Pacific theaters, the tactical Voodoos were the forward-deployed edge of the deterrent.
The distinct camouflage, a necessity for the low-level penetration. The tactical colors were designed to dissolve the Voodoo's massive profile.
The A and C model's critical tactical mission was quickly and silently retired in the early 1960s.
In the cold, dark hangars of the Cold War, the pilot's hand remained steady on the throttle.
The Voodoo was a creation of brilliant engineering, a radical design that pushed the boundaries of supersonic flight, range.
The truth of the F-101A and C can be distilled into a single, terrifying concept: the single strike.